Or like the new perks. They're like, oh, we've stocked the vending machine with like fruit leather, Christmas mints, and we got the new perk of bobbing for pineapples. Like one of the things you'd never want to bob for, and just playing it off seriously.
Not only that, but they're okay. That goes back to like the like psychological warfare. Even in some of the things that were supposed to be, you know, like happy perks, had a kind of a creepiness to them. Bobbing for pineapples, their hands were tied. You don't need to tie hands for that behind their back. There's something insidious about literally tying your employees' hands behind their back. Hello and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today, Mark B. and I are talking about the hit science fiction Apple TV series Severance, Season 2, Episode 1, Hello, Miss Cobel, so spoilers are ahead. And if you're enjoying our episodes, then a like would be appreciated. If you don't want to miss a single one of our breakdowns, then just be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon for notifications. And with that, let's talk about how we were jumped right into this episode. What did you think of the opening?
Well, one of our favorite characters, the hallways. We did talk about like the hallways feel like it's its own entity, right?
Yes.
And just watching Mark frantically running down these halls with just kind of a tense music. You know, I think this show does it really well with creating an eerie vibe or a tension-filled vibe just based off the music, and seeing the panic and frantic of him running and knowing where his mind just came from. Like he just went from being an Outie and then, back into the office, and he's just running a giant maze. I thought it was a great way to start this season.
The hallways are mysterious and important. And I think you're right. Like this episode picked up right where it left off. And it's such a logical conclusion that the first thing he would want to see after learning about Miss Casey is to go where she was. I loved this scene so much. I thought it must have been so expensive to shoot this because it must have required a lot of work and tough coordination. It was made to look kind of like a one-shot. I definitely don't think it was, but it was made to look like a one-shot at frantic speeds. And it really leans into how disorienting this space is, how ridiculously laid out it is. Like it once again just really makes you wonder what is going on and why is everything so different and weird. It brings up so many questions, but it jumps right back from where we started, has amazing music, and I don't think really gives us anything, like it leaves us hanging, but the way it makes us feel was so good.
Oh yeah. And I think that apparently there's 5 months in between from when he was out in the real world to when we see him back at Lumen. So there is some time in between, but then also there's a very like meta reference by Milchek for like the state of the season of Severance, where he says, "Hello, Mark S. It's been a minute," which is a little tongue in cheek for the viewers to be like, hey, it took us a while to get the second season out as well. So I thought, perfect opening, great opening. I thought it was well done.
I might disagree with you on the 5 months comment, but we'll come back to that in a moment.
Oh,
so this first scene also, I thought that it was a brilliant act of, I think, the first of what we are going to see in like psychological warfare. There was something truly nefarious of taking down the sign for the wellness center. And they could have also closed over that wall, like where the door was, because we saw when he opened the door and went into that room that the two doors to go like into where Miss Casey actually was, like the one to go in, the one to go out, had been completely walled over.
Right.
And I don't know, there's something just eerie about that picture of seeing where there were two doors and now there's just a wall, but you can see like the baseboard where it ends, where there should have been door, and then seeing a spot on the wall where the Taming of the Four Tempers used to be. Like you can see the outline. It's like they went out of their way to let Mark see that there used to be things there and they've now taken it all away. You know, like, but it's not completely erased. Like, to me, that seems like a very solid choice. They could have just, once again, closed the door to the room so he couldn't even go in, and it's like it was never there. But instead, they turned it into this, like, what's the point of that room now?
Right, and they took away the whole wellness center because, like, we saw Miss Casey was leaving before and packing up the wellness center, but, like, you would think that they would still have the wellness center, especially, like, if we think about Lumen's reform and it's trying to be the best version of itself for its employees, and the wellness center was probably their best thing that they were taking care of their employees, and now that's just completely gone. And I think that is a bit of a hint to show that Lumen's reforms are not completely harmless or innocent.
Yes, let's definitely talk more about that. I mean, that, once again, I think this kind of goes to, like, I think there is some, like, psychological warfare that's happening. And I think that the Lumen reform is part of that, you know? Mr. Milchick makes a point of saying that there are no cameras and, you know, no microphones in this room or anywhere else on the severed floor. But he doesn't have my trust. I don't think he has their trust. And it's especially weird to tell somebody something like that right after they watched this video on Lumen Reform that actually used their audio.
Right. And like, they also knew about Mark and Helly's romance that happened, which was way out of the sight of cameras, like, because it was by the elevator, and there were, to our knowledge, we've never seen any cameras there. So there is an implication that they are watching them, even though you might not see the cameras.
The storage closet, which might have been the only place where there weren't cameras, which is why they probably got away with their secret plans, that's gone, and now there's just a door for the storage, you know, like when Mark shows the new person where the pens are.
Right.
So now they've gotten rid of all of their weak spots, and now all they have left are the areas where they can record everything.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, well, and also with the whole psychological thriller or the warfare mentality, we even see that originally their coup, or whatever you want to call it, the macrodata uprising, it is kind of painted in a negative way a little bit, but then it's like, but we're doing better and we're so glad it happened. And it's thank Kier it happened. It's part of that.
I wrote that down too.
Part of that brainwashing of, like, hey, even though they did this, you know, it was all part of Kier's plan. Thank Kier that it happened. And that still lays that groundwork of, you know, we've talked about it being like a cult or religion, and that adding that little bit in there, it's so new people they can control better or what, I don't know.
It's brainwashing, and there are so many of these little things. So you know, talking about kind of the new Lumen and some of the changes that we've seen, when Mark goes into Milchick's office, and it's apparently been 5 months, but Milchick is just now moving stuff into the office. Miss Cobel's computer still says, "Hello, Miss Cobel," instead of, like, 5 months later, he still is having this issue. And I think we don't believe the lie of, like, there's no cameras, which means, like, where else do the lies stop? And there was when Mr. Milchick showed the newspaper, at first I didn't actually think anything of it. But as I was reading what wasn't redacted, one of them was it mentioned two of Rickon's books. And one of them was, the UUR. And then the other one was something about like embracing Keir and like living the 9 principles or something like that. And it just didn't fit with me. That didn't seem like what Rickon would write.
Right.
And so then I was like, is this whole thing a sham? And when I looked at the picture that they had, I'm pretty sure that's photoshopped, and I'm pretty sure that's the images from like the picture that they have of the 4 of them on their desks.
Well, I was definitely thinking that was a fake press of them being heroes. Like,
yeah,
I can't imagine us going and seeing the Outies and seeing Mark S., who is very, depressed in life, and smiling at a thing for being the severed employee.
Yes.
They're not allowed to know each other. So would they all be conversing with each other? There was a lot of things. I didn't believe that. And just like we see that in the last season, Lumen will make those paintings of the rebellions that happened that were the other, research and design and macro data and the 2 different things to like get this war. Like, it makes me feel like this was a fake paper. That was not real. That was all staged. I didn't catch that it was their picture, but I definitely thought that's fake. There's no way that that's real.
Right. So it's all of these things that they're doing to like get in their heads one way or another. On some aspects, they are trying to make it look like they're giving more. I don't know if you noticed in their little kitchenette, I think they only used to have enough coins that everybody could use the vending machine once or twice.
Yeah.
And now it's like completely full of coins.
I saw that. I did notice that.
So it's like, oh, go ahead and indulge. And it kind of feels like this isn't the first time that Lumen has had to make changes to try to make it seem like they're taking better care. Because I don't know if you remember in season 1, Irv made a comment about like the original perks. And
yeah. We used to not have cream for our coffee.
Yes.
Oh, so they give, when things like this happen, when people get fussy, they start adding in these little bits.
Yes, and for people who live their like entire lives in here, it feels like such a huge change when anything happens. So it's like they can give the tiniest little tchotchke of a reward, and it's like mind-blowing.
Well, that's what I was thinking with like the balloons, right? Like they were excited about Chinese finger traps and erasers. Getting a whole thing of balloons with your face on it, like that seems like it would be a very nice incentive. And I think maybe they were hoping to give that to Mark to be like, look, Mark, here's some balloons. Just enjoy your balloons. Don't worry about what's going on anymore. Just enjoy it. Right. Here's your new team. Enjoy them. Yeah. But there was the girl that's there, the new girl. She says to him, you went outside. Like, you really went out there. Like, what did you see? So there is some knowledge from people that are severed that people made it out, and that Mark S., it could almost be like a folk hero to them, of like somebody that made it to the outside where severed people don't make it.
We'll talk a little bit more about them. I don't know if they're also part of this psychological warfare. Like, what if they are plants that were trying to get information from him of like, what was it like outside, hoping that he would say what he did? I don't know. But I did want to just get into like one last piece of what I thought was like psychological warfare here, was when Dylan was pulled aside to get told about the family visitation room and to keep it separate from the others. because the others don't have families. This seems like a way to both give an incentive and a perk to make it seem like you're taking care of them, but also to create cracks and divisions. Because they all have family up there, you know? And we don't know what Irving's situation is like, but maybe he wants to see his dog. Maybe he wants to learn he has a dog and like get some petting time with his dog. Mark loves his sister. I'm sure that it would be nice to like meet his sister and talk to her.
Now, the way Milchek presents it, it's not that they don't have family, it's that they're single. So it's not about that they don't have any family. It's that Dylan's the only one that has a partner. And so that's why he gets this incentive. So I don't know if that's going to affect anything of why. I don't even know if I can trust who they're going to bring in for Dylan.
Of course.
And I do think it is targeted towards Dylan because he is very perk incentive motivated. So
yes,
if he has this extra bit, then maybe they can get more. I also really liked that we found this like new secret passage in Milchek's office that went to this weird, dark, mysterious room. And that further makes the belief of like, we still don't know what Lumen is, of like, we don't know what is going on down there.
Yes. So let's talk about the new faces. I don't know if they're real or not. If they're real, it's very elaborate because there were at least some interesting touches. The fact that there are different branches around the world. Is this true or not? The fact that some of those branches might be poor. I thought it was interesting that like the Italians branch, as a nice little nod to his story potentially being true, that they have to use ropes to get up and down.
No elevators.
Instead of elevators. They have their perpetuity wing has like brooms with plates on it for the people. And as an interesting nod to that, he has as his perk that he got, you know, when like Mark S has like that holographic thing made that's obviously like laser etched.
Yeah.
His is just like carved
out of wood.
Like very cheap.
But what was weird is like that had a full name on there. So it was, I wrote it down here. Dario R. Grimwald. So he had a full name on that one. And so I don't know if that lends credence to the idea that these are plants because he has a last name, and the only ones that have last names are Milchek and Cobel, the ones that are now Miss Huang, that have those last names versus people with first names.
That's weird.
Yeah.
I also thought like so the comment about Mark W's branch never hitting quota, it reminded me of last season there was something about Mark S having a breakthrough that changed everything. And I think that's
how he got the etch thing because
yes.
He did such a good job.
So did they not share that with other branches, or it's this whole world is just so interesting that I just every time they give us like a crumb, I get so excited and I eat it up and it's like, just give me one more crumb about this weird world.
Well, in that like video where the building is talking to them, also shout out, I don't know if you noticed, that was Keanu Reeves as the building.
I read that. I didn't catch that.
It's so funny because I was watching it with Julia and I was like, oh my God, that's Keanu Reeves. She's like, that's not Keanu Reeves. I'm like, that is Keanu Reeves. Hands down, that is Keanu Reeves. She's like, that's not him. And then we looked it up and we saw it was, in fact, him. But he talks about how there is 206 locations around the world. We don't know if that's real or not. And I think whether it's real or not, there has the potential of a lot of either stories coming together or this all could be made up. Again, part of the psychological warfare to be like, even if you figure it out, there's still hundreds of other branches that you will, you're not going to stop us in the long run.
Yes. Let's talk about the main group.
Okay.
The gang, the four OGs, because it was well, first of all, it was heartbreaking to not see them in the beginning of the episode. And it was so good when we finally got them back. I love this group and I love their dynamic.
It is a great dynamic. I love the moment with Bert and Irv and Dylan when he's trying to get him to stay, and just they have this really like, Dylan has always been kind of like the tough guy, like I don't care what people think, he attacks Milchek, yada yada yada. But seeing him have this like tender moment with Irv, who in the first season definitely talked shit about him a couple times.
Yes.
And so like seeing like,
yes,
no, like I need you here because I do better when you're here. Like that was seeing the gang back and how they love each other. It was powerful.
And that was such a Dylan way to give a compliment. Like it started from somewhere extremely genuine, and then he took it somewhere a little bit Dylan-y.
Yeah.
And made it kind of about him, but you could tell like the heart and the truth was there, and that reached Irv and was so impactful that's it's weird how there's this creepy underlying thing about death with Severance, of like the innies when they retire, that's kind of like death for them. That's it. And we've already kind of seen references to that. And I think Dylan I don't think he was meaning to make this kind of cut Mark. He was talking about like the new people and the fact that Mark caused them to lose their jobs. And he said, I don't think you should feel bad for ending their lives.
They probably deserved it.
But then like there's this sad thing of in Irv choosing to leave and not work on the file, he's effectively taking his life. And that since the Bert that he loves is also effectively gone, that in some way they'll be together in both being gone. Like that is, it's heart-wrenching. And so when Dylan was able to bring him back, it really got me.
Yeah.
So it's weird how they can like talk about things like death in such a circuitous way where they're not like directly dealing with it, but they also are. Yeah.
I mean, we kind of saw Mark deal with it when Petey left in the first season. Like that was his best friend, and he effectively lost Petey because Petey essentially died to him because he just never was coming back. I am really curious of Helly's arc through this season because she is very much, she's starting to lie to her friends because I think that she is afraid of them finding out she's an Egan. And I mean, regardless of how they accept her, if she's an Egan, because like technically they made it very clear this episode that the innies and the outies have different worlds. They are those are their lives out there. So will the group accept Helly as an Egan because she's not an Egan down there? She's Helly R. So I'm very curious to see where that storyline goes.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was kind of thinking with her, because I think Dawn asked that question of like, why is she lying? And it's like, I think she's ashamed that like she is one of the people that is causing this whole thing. Like if the Egans are at fault, she is an Egan and she's ashamed of that. I love that this one was an all technically not all any episode because, I think that Mr. Milchek isn't severed. I don't know if Miss Huang was, since she claimed that she knew that she was a crossing guard before this.
Right. And
so that seems like she has access to before.
And she took over Milchek's job, and Milchek wasn't severed before, so it does lend the idea that she is not severed.
Although I think...
But
that seems weird having a kid in there, so I think there might be something more to it, though.
Oh, 100%. I think there's way more to Miss Huang, because...
Yes.
First off, she was doing something on her computer, a different task than what they were doing on macro data. And it was like lining things up, and it looked like she had her own perk system with a thing of Egan where she was playing the little ring game. So there is a lot with Miss Huang that we have to unpack, because another thing that has really grabbed my attention with her is we knew, what was his name? Craner last season. Grainer. He had a black key card. Miss Huang had a black key card. Grainer lost his black key card, and he was like head of security. If they were afraid of losing the black key card, why would they give it to a child? They're like, it seems like that would be irresponsible to give something like that to a child when they gave it to someone head of security and he lost the card.
Yeah. It's weird because she seems both childlike and not childlike. So when they're playing the ball game and Mark says that he has 4 new friends and she corrects him and says that she's a supervisor and not his friend, that seems like a level of maturity that I feel like most kids wouldn't be able to understand, that subtlety of like, you have to remove yourself from feelings and you need to be able to supervise these people kind of objectively. That doesn't feel like something a kid could really get. So she seems mature in that aspect, but then she is happy with this like little game that she got with the diver, which I think that was a Kier diver in there.
Yeah. Definitely think that's Kier in there. Which
it's like, yeah.
Well, and that scene, the really cool undertone of that scene is they're playing the ball game, and Mark, who's been this rabble rouser who's been trying to fight things, he's like, I've met 4 friends. Like, it's showing that he is playing the game that Lumen has set up against him. Like, I'm going to do, you can stare me down and I'm just 3 friends. Okay. And I'm also a little surprised that they don't say, these are not your friends. They're your colleagues. It's interesting that they don't point that out and say like, yeah, she's a supervisor, but it's okay for them to be friends in macro data refinement and not just colleagues.
I mean, they definitely were allowed to have friends before because, Milchek had said that Mark and can't think of his name, was his favorite work friendship.
Yeah, Petey.
Yeah, that Mark and Petey was his favorite work friendship. So it definitely was allowed before. And if I'm right that they were hoping to get information by having this team of innies, whether they're plants or not, ask him like, what was the outside like, and get information, that's going to be easier to do if they make a positive connection. And he feels like he can like trust these because they're his friends. So that might have been an intentional thing that they allowed.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but I also could see that if you let them become friends, then they have this chance to like throw a coup or a rebellion. So I do see that there could be a lot of dangers in letting them become friends in cohorts.
They've gotten rid of all the spaces where they can talk secretly. So I think they feel comfortable that there can't be any hidden plans at this point. So I was mentioning before that like I love that this is all kind of like a maybe not technically all any episode, but like all severed floor episode.
Yeah.
Because there's something that has been definitely been mentioned, but I don't think we've been able to understand it on a visceral level, is like how when you go into the elevator to end your day, you immediately come out of the elevator. Like whatever happened to you when you went in the elevator, that just happened to you when you came out. That whole thing of like, yes, maybe you'll feel more refreshed because the person actually got some sleep. And seeing it this episode where we didn't get above ground, there were a few scenes where he went into and then immediately came out of the elevator, and it just made it so much more visceral. Like when Mark thinks that he's getting fired, he made that revelation in the elevator
that he's
and he
die.
tried to like get out. I think he thought his life was ending, and the next second, doors open and there's that weird ass painting.
Yes.
That's like, think about these like mind fucks.
Right. And the fact that it was like forgive. So that whole painting is called Kier Forgives His Betrayers.
Yes.
But like, it's so interesting seeing that picture that says forgive the betrayers, but also in the video that they do in the Lumen thing, they're regarded as heroes.
Right.
So it's like, in that way, they're like, oh, you guys did the right thing by creating these reforms that Lumen needed. But then also the first thing you saw was Kier forgives his betrayers. You know, he pardons the people that have betrayed him. 4 heads. I don't quite think it's R4. It looks a little bit different. Like one doesn't quite look like Helly. But they do look very similar to Dylan and Irv. You know, we've made the connection that there's 4 of them, like the 4 tempers. Like, is that another taming of the 4 tempers in the betrayal?
Interesting.
And this is how he has to tame them this way, is by forgiving the betrayers.
Yes. So, like similar to seeing like how visceral that thing is with the elevator, I loved the entrances of the people coming out of the elevator. We already mentioned in the opening sequence, Mark just learned that his Outie's wife is still alive, and the person that he knew, and he runs. Irving's broke my heart because like he just sees the love of his life in the outside world and is banging on the door to like get his attention. And that translates to him banging in the elevator. And that just like, it just broke my heart. Like it feels like it's immediately after, whether or not it is 5 months later, or maybe that's a lie. Maybe it's a week later. I think some time could have passed. I don't believe the 5-month thing.
And it's crazy that one thing Milchek said about Irving specifically is he made contact with somebody. Irving never really made contact. I mean, I think it's talking about after he woke up, Irving outside made it to Bert.
Yes.
But we don't know what that entails. Like, what does that... Because... they woke up in places like Mark woke up at home, Helly was in the gala, and then Irv may have woke up there and had contact with him as unsevered people that might get a different kind of ball rolling that might create some tension outside of here. Speaking of paintings... there was a new form of paintings in the form of posters in that break room.
Yes.
And did you see them?
Yeah, I didn't know what to make of them. So like they were weird.
Okay, well, I have a couple connections.
Okay, yes, please.
Okay, so first is there was one that said hang in there. And I don't know if you could tell what it was.
No.
It was Dylan holding the switches. Hang in there. So there was that one.
Okay.
That kind of like caught my eye a little bit, was like, okay.
The B one stood out the most to me.
Okay.
But I didn't know what to make of it.
Be Ever Merry. That one I don't have too much on, except that the B looked like it had a weird face, maybe a Kier face.
Okay.
There was Frolic-aholic. And wasn't there was one of the tempers that is...
Yeah, Frolic.
Was it Frolic?
Yeah.
So Frolic-aholic, which was one of the tempers. And then Grin and Bared It. And I'm pretty sure, and I could be wrong, I might be misremembering, let me know in the comments, but Grin and Bared It, I think Mark was living in a Baird, like the housing tract he was in was Baird. And I think one of the former CEOs of Lumen was Baird. So Grin and Bared It, because normally the saying is Grin and Bear It. Grin and Bared It, I think, is a play on the one CEO. And there's 4 posters, like there's 4 macro data refinement people, like there's 4 tempers. I don't know if it has anything to do with anything, but it's fun to speculate on.
I love it. The one that so the end of the episode, the thing that I don't know anything about, all I can do is give a little bit of additional insight. It still won't tell you what the hell happened, but so you saw that Mark S was working on the Cold Harbor file.
Yes. And it had Miss Casey.
And then it cut to Miss Casey. It said Cold Harbor above it. It had the same percentage. I think it was like 68% completed. It showed what looked like maybe her vitals.
Yeah, I saw temp.
And it showed the same boxes underneath. I think like 5 boxes with the different percents of the 4 types of numbers.
Okay. And
I'm going to give a little bit of context. I don't think that most people have watched our season 1 episodes. So, or some of the shorts that we've done. So there is an extra piece of content for Severance. If you haven't read it, you can stop watching this. It's perfectly
No, don't stop watching this. Don't listen to him.
It's so good. If you go to Apple Books, there's something called the Lexington Letters. And it's got it's short, it's free, and it's got some extra interesting information. And I think one of them that is specific to this is the fact, there's actually 2 points I think could be specific to this. So one of them is that it actually shows the manual for new employees. And the way it describes the 4 types of numbers lines up with the 4 tempers. So it seems like, and then there's a quote from Kieran in season 1 when they're in the perpetuity wing about, it kind of sounded like if you can tame the 4 tempers, it almost sounded like you can live forever or continue on or like
transcend or like you have the success of life or something like.
It was something weird like that. And then the other interesting thing about the Lexington letter is there's a letter in it, and that letter it's from somebody who was an innie that was able to communicate with her Outie, and they found out that when the innie completed her file, first of all, these files expire. So if you don't get them done in a certain amount of time, then you don't finish it. You just get new files, which is weird for files. And when she completed her file, 2 minutes later, there was an explosion outside in the real world that was one of Lumen's biggest competitors. Like it was one of their trucks. And she speculated about if there's a correlation. And so I don't know what any of this means. I'm just pointing out things that people may not know that are important to know. The closest that I can get to it, like it seems like Mark S. might be working on Miss Casey in some fashion.
Right.
They're holding her down in the like basement, doing weird stuff to her.
Okay, so one thing that I might have to add to that could be, I do think that they could be working on people. Cold Harbor makes me feel like that she's like maybe cryogenically frozen. We have seen what looks like maybe Keir Egan has found a way to clone himself, potentially. Like we see the sheep, which are also very famous for cloning, Dolly the sheep. So those
goats?
Well,
sheep?
Yeah, I think they're goats, but
goats.
The one we see, they are goats, but they look like baby lambs, baby goats, whichever. Okay. Anyway, cloning could be a thing. What if Miss Huang is a clone of Miss Casey, and the first Miss Casey was unsuccessful, like using the actual Miss Casey mind wiped was unsuccessful because she had this pull towards Mark regardless. And Miss Huang is a new Miss Casey that is, they're growing her and having her be something that works in Lumen.
Interesting.
This is tinfoil hat territory right now.
Right. So one other kind of important thing, or like a few other important connections to point out from last episode or last season, Miss Cobel had in her place, she had that like shrine, and at the bottom of it, it looked like there was like a medical bracelet. And I can't remember the name, but it was something Cobel. She has a necklace that looks like it has one of the Severance things in it.
Well, wasn't that Petey's chip? In the
I didn't know
necklace?
if that was from. I didn't know if that was that, or if that was from something she was holding on to from before it, because she made it seem like it was very important to her personally that many of these things worked, and like she was the one who believed that reintegration was possible.
Right. And I thought she proved it with Petey.
Pushed to get, yes, Petey's chip, exactly. So, and I definitely believe that she is coming back. This episode is called Hello, Miss Cobel. The next one I think is called like Goodbye, Mrs. Selvig.
Interesting.
I love her character. I want to see her so badly.
I did think that was a great name for the episode, to have Zero Cobel in there.
But it's from and I said the same thing to Dawn, and she was like, that's what was on Mr. Milchick's computer. I forgot that because I was wondering what the influence is, and
But that was such a small part of the entire episode. To name the whole episode Hello, Miss Cobel is very odd choice, but I think it is alluding that she will be 100% coming back.
Right. Last thing that I just wanted to say is the music in this series is just on point. You know, whether or not it's like music that is chosen for it, or whether it's the score, I absolutely love it. It's weird how great that opening song was, because it was jaunty, kind of like the song we got in like the beginning of the first episode.
Right.
And that seems like it should have felt kind of counter to how frantic things were, but it beautifully transitioned from that to like the actual Severance, you know, opening, like some of that music. I loved what they did at the end. It to me, it feels kind of like the show where things can sometimes have dichotomies, you know, where it's like the surface of that song can sound jaunty, but it somehow can fit this like frantic and frenetic scene.
Yeah. No, I think that is one thing Severance does really well is the music. And like you were mentioning that dichotomy of certain aspects of the show, like this takes really serious material, really like heavy ideas and like how people are coping and really like painful, heart tenderizing moments. And yet it's so good at comedy too. Like this episode showed that like there was still great comedic beats that they could like, and not cheapening anything, not doing it for a cheap laugh, not like the Marvel movie jokes. It's just like really well written jokes that maybe aren't supposed to even be jokes in their world, but just come off so clever. I love it.
And the jokes aren't, many of them aren't even like exactly like you said with like the Marvel things where they're not always punchlines. Oftentimes they're things that are like anachronistic, like it sticks out. And because of that, it makes you laugh that it's like so weird. And some of them are punchlines, but some of them could only be delivered by people that have great comedic chops, because so many of them are done so deadpan and like they aren't jokes.
Yeah.
You know, like that's one of the big difference. Like Tony Stark, he knows that he's getting in a good joke. He knows that what he's doing is a quip. No, he doesn't know that there's an audience laughing at it, but he knows that like the other people behind him are snickering at what he just said.
There's like a wink and a nod aspect to it. Like,
yes. Versus like so many of these, the people involved in them don't know that it's a joke. They don't know that if there was an audience watching them that they'd be laughing. They're not doing it for the camera.
Right.
It's so earnest, and like I love it.
Or like the new perks. They're like, oh, we've stocked the vending machine with like fruit leather, Christmas mints, and we got the new perk of bobbing for pineapples. Like one of the things you'd never want to bob for, and just playing it off seriously.
Not only that, but they're okay. That goes back to like that the like psychological warfare. There was. Even in some of the things that were supposed to be, you know, like happy perks, had a kind of a creepiness to them. Bobbing for pineapples, their hands were tied. You don't need to tie hands for that behind their back. That's just a rule. You don't use your hands. You use your mouth. You don't.
Right.
There's something insidious about literally tying your employees' hands behind their back.
Right. And almost like, with the hall pass thing, it seemed like before they were allowed to walk down the halls. Like, how many times did Irv go there? And it's like, now you get hall passes. Like, we'll let you go in the halls, but it's like you're actually taking away their right to go in the halls.
Yes.
There is a lot of psychological warfare in that.
It's so insidious. And then, like, once again, Mr. Milchick just kills it with like he delivers some truly insidious things with like such a soft voice and such a beautiful smile, and like his eyes have so much warmth. I don't know how like so much he can drive so much fear and have it. It's wild. His performance is just amazing.
I agree. I think Milchick is one of the most, probably the strongest, one of the strongest performances in that show. It's just phenomenally done. He, you know, his scene with Dylan where Dylan was like, is this where I can meet my, you know, I can go out and meet my Outie relationships? And he's like, well, by reading what the, you know, blueprints say, I would say so. You know, it's just like this, so warm, but like so just evil. I love it.
Absolutely. Love it.
Great show. Great episode.
Yeah.
One last thing. And I just want to pick your brain on this. We see Mark in the wellness center that's all boarded off.
I meant to say this too.
There was somebody behind him.
Yes.
Quick moment, blink and you miss it. Guy pops out. Doesn't
Yes.
look like Milchek.
Yes.
Who was that? Was that Kier?
I don't think it's anybody that we know.
I don't either. But I think it's going to be important. But such a quick moment. They don't talk about it, never readdressed. Very, very curious what that is, who that is.
Yes, and there was something creepy about that person, like checking in and seeing Mark at his most vulnerable.
Yeah. I'm very curious of who that is.
Yeah.
But with that, I think our journey has come to an end. Thank you folks so much for joining along with us. This week we have our finale to Silo coming out, as well as next week we will do Severance episode 2. So we look forward to having you join us along in those. But until then, I'm Mark. This is Sterling.
Thanks.